We're glad you all are here. Natalie and I are glad today to have a conversation about Mary. Oh, Mary, don't you weep? Oh, Mary of anointing oil and all the Marys. Natalie, there's a lot of Marys in this story.
There's so many Marys. And it's so fascinating, even though there are so many Marys, how when we get to this moment in our church calendar, that it's the men that we center. There's so many Marys. There's so many women and so many Marys, but the people that we get to hear about are the men in this story. And this story wouldn't actually have been told if it weren't for the women, right?
We would not have the story to tell if there wasn't a woman named Mary who was a teacher who participated in the birthing of the revolution.
And even in the stories that, like my favorite gospel is the Gospel of Mark, that ends with they went to the tomb and they did not find Jesus. And in this one moment, the whole gospel, Jesus is like, don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody. And at the end, Jesus is like, please go tell everyone. And like, run away and tell no one. Like it's the biggest ancient joke. But if you're not in that time period, you might not get it, but it's supposed to be funny. But obviously they told people because we have it, right?
That's right.
And Mary,
let's set an intention because you and I jumped right in.
I'm ready.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Some of you are going to see this after this conversation happens live, so we're excited you're here. And I'm thrilled to be talking to the Reverend Natalie Renee Perkins, who is a multi-hyphenate, talented, amazing, gifted artist, writer, preacher, who also is my favorite non-canonical book expert. And so she's here today, and we're talking about Mary, at least one Mary, but Mary at the tomb with Trembling, Boldness. I'm Jacqui Lewis, Senior Minister at Middle Collegiate Church, and we're glad you're here.
Thanks, Jacqui.
Keep going, sis. Keep going. Talk about it. Tell us something.
Yeah, what was I can't try to get excited about this, so I have to find where I was. But the Gospels, what did you say in your sermon? Was it last Sunday about the different Gospels and how they
different points, different vantage points, like all of us watching a thing and telling the story, right, from where they live. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And even on that, telling a story of something that happened a few decades ago, how do I tell something that happened 20 years ago, and how do you tell something that happened 20 years ago, and how does so they're all doing everything. But regardless of how they handle Mary in the text, they all handle Mary. She's there, right?
That's right.
You can't not have her.
Right.
And we've had some bad theologies that have popped up, hundreds of years later, the conflation of Mary with the prostitute, that story being just coming out of a bad sermon. And, it's really not in the Bible, friends. I hope you
not in the Bible, friends.
But if you don't know, now you know. These two Black Reverend aunties gonna set you straight.
Mary will help you know.
Mary of Magdala and the prostitute in the Bible are two different people, or two different stories, rather. And what happens is someone really important, Pope Gregory in this instance, gives a sermon, and people take it as gospel. They take it as this is what the Bible is. It's not. And then as a result of that, it gets traction, gathers moss, and we have Jesus Christ Superstar. We have all of these things that pick up this story so that is now the way that it is told. There is an extra canonical text called the Gospel of Mary. The extra canonical texts are those of you who have never heard that word. Those are texts written around the same time as everything else in our New Testament, but for one reason or other got left out. Sometimes that reason is #patriarchy. I surmise, particularly in the example of the Gospel of Mary. Some scholars do think that it is Mary of Magdala. So we are, I also have this book I should show. If you're looking for more information on it, I don't know if you can see it. In Trembling.
Pull back just a little. There we go. There it is. Natalie's book.
Here's the
That's
book. And there's a whole section on the Gospel of Mary where you can learn a little bit more, but we're going to give you the cliff notes, the quick and dirty, as I like to say, in this space, so that you'll have it. And then hopefully be piqued to learn more about these texts. But in that story, in that gospel, she's a central character. Jesus is there, the disciples are there, which really just means student. They're all there, but Mary is the one who is central. She's the one who has the action, who is telling the story. It takes place after Jesus has died, before he ascends. He comes to impart some wisdom, and then it says he leaves for good. And the disciples are in a shambles over it. They're distraught, they're panicking. And Mary is like, let me tell you what Jesus told me. And she goes into this multiple chapter relaying of this thing from Jesus that we have lost. I imagine for the same reasons I named before, that it was really hard for women texts, women anything, but in this sense, a women text to survive when you're trying to uphold a patriarchal system. You can't have women leaders, right? It makes it harder to maintain that. So a lot of that has been lost, and we have the top of it, a little bit of the story, and then we have the end when she finishes, and it says when she had finished, they turned their hearts toward the good. We have, who is it? Peter, who's like, why are we believing this woman? Like, what are these words that he would say to her and not to us? And Levi comes and is like, Peter, you've always been angry. Like, like calls him out and reminds the disciples, how Jesus loved Mary specifically, and why this might have been something that Jesus would say, and that we should believe the women.
The women.
Sound familiar?
We say it at exactly the same time in harmony, just about.
So that's what that text is doing in that time period, is just trying to share this different account of the post-Jesus crucifixion moment, alongside these other texts that were written that are trying to share this one for all the reasons we will never know, and some that we can probably guess, as I said, didn't survive in its entirety, but it's probably about 18 or 19 pages long if you were to try and measure it up, and gives us a really good sense of another version aspect of Mary.
I think that's so important, Natalie, that you have dug into these texts. I'm really excited about that. And also the kind of leave outedness of them in the canon that Natalie and I are trying to teach also is a construct, right? I mean, there's a source, an original source of some of these gospel materials that's called Q, which basically just stands for the thing or the source, but it predates the Gospels. And Mark is, most of us know, but let me just remind us, the earliest written gospel, we think, and Matthew follows that, and Luke there also, and John kind of stands over there with his own view, not necessarily the same view synoptic. But inside the texts that do make the canon, that do make the cut, you can feel two things, Natalie. One for me is like the competition between Peter and John. So Peter's always trying to cut somebody. Then this one was running, but this one was running faster, but this one got through. It's like Moses and Joshua.
Why is that even a sentence? Why are we including that? Who ran faster was an important sentence.
Who ran faster?
No.
It was sort of like, it felt like to me like it was the compromise of some kind of, look, we're going to try to let both of y'all be important here. But
not important to give you a name, right?
Yeah,
it's just the other disciple ran faster. But Peter went in.
But Mary, as you say, my favorite gospel telling is Mary at the tomb, standing outside, crying, not able to recognize Jesus, until he
Mhm.
calls her name.
Mhm.
And then though there is the kind of dynamic of, as you said when we started, don't tell, do tell, don't tell us all, the kind of joke in don't tell, Mary clearly is told by Jesus to go and tell the others. So she's the first proclaimer, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
What's our struggle with that? Since you and I talk in church all the time, and supposedly we're not supposed to talk in church.
Yeah. Right, because she is one of the first theologians, and we as is Eve, right? Like, and we really aren't interested in telling that story. The ones that we want to tell are about the male apostles and how they are sharing. And what is lost is really the question that I sit with a lot. What is lost when we don't recognize these women, particularly in this instance, this Mary, as someone who was telling the Christ story? What is lost is like chapters upon chapters of text where Jesus was telling someone a thing, and we don't have it in its entirety because women aren't allowed to tell the story, right? It was more valuable to uphold that system that oppresses women than it was to hold Jesus's word, to be able to follow the model that we say as Christians we are following. And that is the thing that I feel like we wrestle with so much right now in this country, in this society. I don't want to speak to the rest of the world, but like, what's more important, right? What Jesus is saying about love, or that you feel good about it? What Jesus is saying about love, and what, or does it align with what you want? You know?
Say that. The editorial project, the redacting project, the hermeneutic, let's pick all of those words, the lens through which patriarchy wants to continue to interpret these texts. And I don't want to get technical today because it makes my head hurt, and I'm preaching a little bit about it tomorrow. But even like this crazy behind who's the Messiah talk, about kind of needing a great white hope, not for the first time, but once again, a great white hope in Trump. Like any foolish human, mommy said, don't call people fools, any foolish human that could imagine some kind of parallel structure between Donald J. Trump and, Yeshua ben Joseph, like what? They both got arrested, that's all it is. But Natalie, the church, sadly, writ large, has too many fear-based, small, puny, racist, white supremacist, egotistical, classist, patriarchal laden lenses through which we're looking at the text that continues to leave out the voices of women, continues to leave out the voices of Mary. And when you leave out the voices of the margins, you actually are leaving out the voice of Jesus, a marginalized Jew.
That part.
Right there.
That part. Mm-hmm. Right?
What? How can we, Nellie, how can we claw back? How can we reimagine, rebirth the teachings of the brown one? Right? What? How do we get back to Jesus? Girl, how do we get back to Jesus?
And the thing that I hear, the thing I hear you saying also is what, as we're saying, what's left out when you do that, right? Like there's an element and a dynamic to the wholeness of Jesus that we leave out when we don't also include the brown people, when we don't include the Black people, when we don't include women, when we don't include disabled people, when we don't include poor people. Like what? Anytime we're shifting Jesus to be white, cis het, of a certain economic status, able-bodied, like all of these Christian, Jesus was not Christian. Also, I don't know if that's news in this space, but we got to say that out loud.
News at 12. Jesus was not a Christian. Okay, updates tomorrow. Okay, go ahead. Matt.
Jesus is not a Christian. Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. We got to hold those.
There we go.
And so the goal in the book that I co-wrote with Reverend Dr. Hal Tausig was to create these, I'm going to say devotionals, but reflections maybe, that include the stories of marginalized people, those that you don't ever actually get to read in a devotional, that I never get to see in a devotional, right? Like, you don't see battered women, you don't see incarcerated people, you don't see queer people, you don't see, women. Like, who gets to then tell the story?
Yeah.
And we know, you and I as writers know, that the universal is in the specific.
That's
and
right.
As Black women who write, our specific is enough, right? We don't actually have to write towards a white gaze or lens, that the specific can be found in our stories too. And when you show up to that, you and I have had this conversation about learning and teaching, people who want to learn, and whether we should be doing the teaching of that or not, right? Whether they show up and drink the water on their own, or whether we have to, like, here, will you please have this water? It's very good for you. And here's why, like, right. So in that same sense, right? Yeah, I'm just curious about how we continue to show up for that,
Yeah, and Natalie and I are both Black women, American women, in the United States of America. When you see this wherever, women that are older than 20, and that's enough on that age thing, but have lived a life in this nation, bifurcationally, both of us in lots of different ways. And our perspective, our hermeneutic is enough, is what Natalie's saying. It is enough. And I want to say, if you want to know Jesus, our project, I think, as a church, and when I say, do you want to know Jesus? Do you want to know what Jesus had to give the world in terms of a way to be a healer, a way to be a waymaker, a way to be a justice warrior, a way to live a life of faith that honors our humanity and the divine in each of us? If that's our project as a church, then you have to be curious about the perspectives of others who are not like you, but especially those who are like Jesus, particularly Jewish, particularly Black, Brown, African Semitic. Read the genealogies and don't be mad. And if you want to read some more, look at Kane Hope Felder, or look at Jacqui Lewis in Fierce Love, and look at Curtis DeYoung in Coming Together. Look at the folks. Just go Afro-Semitic Jesus and stuff will pop up. We can't know Jesus by not knowing his context. We got to know Nazareth. We got to know what would have been Judea. We got to know what became to be Palestine. We can't know Jesus sitting up in here acting like he was a blonde Aryan from Germany. And if we don't know Jesus, then we really don't know, okay, ready, set, what God wants.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, as the ones who say we're Christian. How does that feel?
We can't know. Jesus did a really great job of being like, hey, here's this path for following God, who, the relationship for Jesus was so close that he called daddy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So if that's the model that he's laying out for a very personal, close relationship that got him killed, right? That's the whole tea of this weekend, right? Is that when you are doing something so radical, like following God, right? If you're going to follow Jesus like that, the end of that is death.
The end of that is death.
That is death, which is scary, but I do fundamentally believe that if we are all showing up to that together, that there is life in that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the death, what dies must die.
Yes.
What dies are these systems that want to call Mary a hoe, these systems that want to make Jesus an Aryan, the systems that want our lives not to matter, Black lives not to matter, immigrant lives, disabled lives, poor lives not to matter, the systems that our empire, Natalie, actually need to die for the human family and the planet to flourish.
That's exactly right. And the discomfort that may or may not come with that, because we are all swimming in this water, We've all been steeped in this for however many years you've been on this earth, right? That
Right.
the sexism, racism, homophobia, ageism, classism, we're all steeped in that. So when those things do die, recognizing that there's probably going to be something inside of you that has to die as well.
Exactly, Natalie. Really well said.
Right.
Really well said. And
There's
what
a,
go ahead, Peg. Go ahead first.
I was gonna say there's a verse in Gospel Thomas, Dr. James Cone, who, you know, is the father of Black liberation theology. I'm saying here for if there's anybody who does not know. His favorite verse in the Gospel of Thomas is, if you do not bring forth that which is within you, that thing will kill you. But if you bring forth what is within you, that thing will give you life. Right? So the goal of continuing to uproot this stuff and bring it out so that you can have, as Jesus said, life and have it more abundantly. But if you don't do that, yeah, there is some real serious consequences in you to that, right? There's some death dealing stuff that's gonna have to be reconciled at the end of the day.
Facts. And just to take facts over to truth, you know, one of the things that I love about your work, Natalie, as a scholar and as a preacher and as an artist, is the way you have found these truths. I'm going to go across disciplines, not only in theology, but also in art, right? Natalie's an artist, for those of you who don't know, an artist and a musician and a composer. So there's truth across these disciplines. And, you know, when I was doing the research for my book, Fierce Love, the truth that is across religions is how much our lives are interdependent. Like what needs to come out of us, I think, in order for us to flourish, is the reality that we are not independent agents on the planet. We're interdependent species on the planet. And that preceding the Christianity that we claim as faith, more than one path to God type of Christianity, I would say, as faith, is that preceding any of these languages that are about faith, Judaism, Islam, Sikh, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, all of those languages of faith, is Ubuntu. This I am who I am because you are who you are. That, you know, the disciples weren't who they were without Mary and her testimony. They weren't who they were without Jesus and his teaching. And the way sometimes, Natalie, I'm feeling caustic as I say this, a little tangy. Some ways we build the life we want on lies, not truth. And so the lies upon which we have built our structures and systems, that women's voices don't count, that God doesn't speak to women, that women shouldn't talk, that Jesus didn't make a particular revelation to Mary, that Jesus didn't choose Mary to go out there first and make this proclamation. Those lies that want to separate us and diminish some of us, those have to get out of us. If we're going to really live this thing, Ubuntu, I am a flourishing human because you're a flourishing human.
That's exactly right. Yep. And that's kind of the Pentecost moment too, right?
Right.
That we're able to come together. All of these different ways of understanding this come together in the Ubuntu moment, you know?
Yeah. I'm putting your book in the chat just so people can get it. Natalie, tomorrow is Easter Sunday, and we are got all kinds of worship happening. But just in case someone's going to see this in 6 months or before tomorrow, or someone who isn't going to make their way to a church tomorrow, what's the blessing you want to have happen for people as they listen to this conversation? What's the takeaway you hope will touch their heart?
My prayer is always that someone will be exposed to these extra canonical texts, these things that were written right alongside of the things that they've always held in their hearts. And as a result of being exposed to this and having their Bible, they will be able to read it with fresh eyes and see what's there. We just have thousands of years of orthodoxy and orthopraxy stacked on top of our traditional canon that doesn't let us see what's actually on the page. And there's just some real fresh new life in there
Yeah, there is.
that supports, you know, some of the things that we fight for every single day in the liminal space.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's beautiful. And I would add to what you're saying, Natalie. You know, you and I are theologians, which I think means we're listening for what God is saying. And my prayer for y'all as we wrap is that you would become a theologian in residence in your own life. That you pick up Natalie's book, that it stretches you as you listen to the voices that are represented in this beautiful book that Natalie and Hal put together, and their perspective, those perspectives will prompt you to think, well, really, what's mine? You know, what do I deeply believe? What really guides my planet? What really guards my heart? What do I hold to be so precious in these moments that I can lean into it and it can speak to me over and over again and help me be the human, you know, that I want to be. That's what I hope.
Yeah, amen to that. I'm also hoping that even if you don't hold the Bible as a text that is life-giving for you, that you can find life in these texts is another way for you to be able to access something that maybe has been taken from you, maybe doesn't hold the same weight for you as it does for others, but there's life inside of them.
Which is to say, riffing off of Natalie, there are so many texts that are holy and whole.
Yes, God.
Right?
Yes.
Like read some stuff read some Howard Thurman, read some Toni Morrison, read some Alice Walker, read some Zora Neale Hurston. Like God, read some James Cone, read some Jimmy Baldwin, read some things.
It's all God talk. Yeah.
Right? It's all God talk. That'll make your heart go, yes, that works for me. That works for me.
Yeah, Dr. Cone used to always say that. It's all God talk.
It's all God talk. And Natalie, what's your album? Listen to some music, y'all.
Songs of Your Truth is the name of the album. So In Trembling, Boldness, Wisdom for Today from Ancient Jesus People is the book. Available, I think, on all the places where you would get you would purchase a book. It's on Amazon if you're an Amazon person. Broadleaf's website has it. If you're connected to me on socials, it's in my bio, all the places you can buy it. And the album is available wherever you all the major places you buy music. So yeah.
It's wonderful. Natalie, Renee, I can't wait to see you tomorrow when we do the early.
Yeah.
And I hope, friends, that you've been blessed by this conversation. Natalie and I would love to stay in touch with you. I'm going to tell you where to follow me in Middle Church, and Natalie's going to remind you where to follow her. I'm at Rev Jacqui Lewis in all the places. We're at Middle Church in all the places that you can find us to check in. And Natalie's handles are?
I'm at Diva Does Divinity in all the places. Yeah.
I just wanted her to say that because I think when she says it, it sounds better. What is it again, Rev? What?
Diva Does Divinity.
That's what I'm talking about. When the divas do divinity, it's a beautiful day. We send you out into the world, hoping you'll wrestle with God talk and create your own.